Is that it again? I've already reacted to the previous video that I did of this, but I'm getting a bit annoyed with this particular case. Now, I do like him, but you see, the thing is, I think there's a slight bias thing going on here, because obviously he's probably going to end up knowing people or getting to know people whose paint has exploded in the car when they've been to Wickes, B&Q, Homebase, whatever. And the reason why I do disagree, and why I think people are stupid, and why once again this is just going to be an extra bill for people with a brain to having to compensate for stupid people.
What a lovely chap. Thank you for your kind comments, but also thank you for your opinion, because lots of people will have different opinions. If you want to check out more from Charlie, I will link the video in the description below for credit. But if you have your opinion like this, that's absolutely fine. Now, I don't agree that I'm going to be biased. I will approach every case neutrally and tell people what the law says. Now, yes, barristers will fight fiercely for their clients. They will try to use the law and the regulations and any previous decisions in case law to the best possible advantage of a client, of course. However, if the law is against somebody, then of course we're not going to bend and twist the law so that it better suits the client, only so much so that it is within the law. Now, in this video, in this Wickes Problem that seems to go on and on, this might become a series. Maybe it's too late for that. But this is a problem. Now, looking at this from a neutral, objective perspective, as I say, I am not biased at all. I take the situation and the law as it is, and I explain what it is. Now, in this situation, DIYers, do it yourself, that is, consumers that are doing it themselves. So we're not necessarily just talking about tradespeople here. Tradespeople, you might argue, are in the profession, have better knowledge, should know better, etc. But if these are aimed and marketed at the DIY market, which they are, it's not trade only. If they're marketed at consumers, consumers are deemed to not have the professional knowledge and the experience that other tradespeople might have. So as a sort of novice DIY person myself, if I were to go and pick up a tin of paint and put it in my car, yes, the car is going to be a different temperature. Now, when I say hot cars in my video previously, I'm not necessarily talking about, it's in a chilled environment in the warehouse, aircon or whatever, and then you bring it out and it's a hot summer's day, you put it in the back. I'm not necessarily talking about that. It could also be in winter, where it is really cold in the shop because it's winter. You bring it to the car and your car's obviously got the heating on because you've travelled to the shop. There is no way to avoid that. And so there is no other way, unless you're walking home with the tin of paint, there's no other way to transport it other than in the back of the car. I agree with the one image that you objected to, which is this one here, where it was obviously on the passenger seat of a vehicle. Now, I wouldn't have put it on the passenger seat of a vehicle, but I can understand why people do. They just didn't think anything of it. They just thought, well, it should be sealed properly, and so it's on the seat, and so they just transported it on the seat. Personally, I wouldn't have done that, but no criticism really intended of the person that did that. It's just that I wouldn't have done that, and obviously that's probably not the best place to put it. But even then, the one on in the boot, which you also showed here, this is also causing significant damage. This looks like it's a Range Rover or something, but equally that's caused devastation at the back of the vehicle there. It has to go somewhere, and the vehicle is going to be a different temperature to a cold warehouse. So what I'm saying is there is no alternative to where you're going to put it. Yes, you could put it in a black bag and wrap it up, but you can't expect consumers to take all those extra steps as a matter of course, because people just won't do that. Therefore, it's got to be the case that the manufacturers, the suppliers, the retailers and the wholesalers, they do need to take account of this, and they do need to consider this. And so in the legislation, it does provide for this. This is not me being biased. This is me telling you what the law says. The law says that if there is a risk that this is going to cause damage to property, personal injury or death, then they are responsible for it. And also in consumer legislation, products have to be fit for purpose and satisfactory quality and free from defects and all of these kind of things. And inherent in that, even aside from legislation, there would be an implied term, in my view, that the container that the paint is in is sufficient to contain the paint for transport. Otherwise, it's a defective container. And that container should be adapted and designed and modified and whatever to the extent that it is not readily going to leak and explode. Now, if you put it in the boot, much like this one was here, and it is unsupported, as you quite rightly say in your video, it's unsupported. You can't see anything else in there. You might suggest that it should be supported. But again, a consumer is not necessarily going to think like that. A consumer is just going to go into the store, tub of paint, back of the car, let's go home. I did exactly this not too long ago, and having seen, in fact, when I did my first video in Wickes and I was behind the lady, I was going to return a tub of paint because I did the amateur thing of buying silk instead of matte. So I had to do the switch over. So I was putting paint in the back of the car, and I was lucky in that it didn't explode. What position are we in? I'm not a stupid person, at least I don't think I'm a stupid person, but I didn't think about putting it in a bag and securing it and that sort of stuff. I did wedge it and put the seatbelt around it so that it didn't move, but that wouldn't have protected me if the temperature of the car was sufficient to make this explode. I don't know if this is more prevalent with plastic tubs as opposed to metal tubs, but also I've had a flurry of emails from other people, one of whom wishes to remain anonymous, but sent me an email and said that they worked as a branch manager for a national decorators merchant for, as he says, far too long, and would happily take a call to discuss these things. And just to go over some of the issues mentioned here so that everybody is better informed, because the sharing of videos and ideas and opinions is what's going to help people here. So thank you for your video and your opinion. So I'm going to share some of the opinions and the comments made by this ex-branch manager of many years' experience. He says that the issue that I mentioned almost exclusively concerns paint that has been tinted to order at the branch. So for those that are not familiar with that, it's not the case of buying a standard tub of white. It is one of those where you match a color, they mix it in the machine, shake it around, and then you bring it away with you. Someone else in the comment section I saw said that that's why they have the extra metal clips, because they know of this problem, supposedly. He goes on to say, trade customers almost never have a problem with this as they stow their paint sensibly. That backs up your point. Why mixed or tinted paint? This emailer goes on. The bases that arrive in store to be made into colors have to offer two main features in addition to those used for white and ready-mix colors. Firstly, they must be easily opened and closed by the retailer for appropriate tint to be added. That's understandable. Secondly, they must be sufficiently robust to withstand forces applied with the agitator that shakes them around to mix the paint to disperse the colorant into the base. It is the former that applies to this issue, that being that they are easily opened. A reputable retailer, he goes on, will paste 2 strips of tape across the top, forming a cross after the tinting. The clips don't work very well and they're easily knocked off. The tape should be a clear warning. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So it's that simple extra step that these retailers can take to prevent this from happening. And I might suggest should take, on the sale of each product, it would take all of a minute or two to put an extra couple of strips of tape across the top. He goes on, sometimes with customers, I would put tape around the tin with about 8 millimeters raised above the edge. I would then carefully fold it down around the tin to further secure the closure. We also did this if the paint was entrusted to a courier. Now, many couriers don't take paint, probably for this very reason. How can a shop avoid the spillages? He goes on, as well as using the tape, I always told new customers the following. The tin is not like a tin of beans. It has a resealable closure. If it goes over in your car, the lid will probably come off. Don't put it in the passenger footwell, because then you brake, it will tip forward. Much better behind the front seats or up against the rear seats in the boot. Wedge it gently if you can. Yes, quite a mouthful, but I've said it 1,000 times. He said we would often walk paint to customers' cars. We were told not to load the vehicles for obvious reasons. If they're not obvious to you, with respect, it's because if the person loading the vehicle damages the vehicle, then they might well be held liable. Obviously, the shop would be held liable for any damage, potentially at least. I often did, he said, but never without explaining how and why I was doing it. Now, just in the defense of any retailers that do load vehicles like this, it would be best efforts. And if you explain that it's best efforts, then if anything does go wrong, you damage the vehicle, then, you know, so long as you've made best efforts and you haven't been utterly careless, then you're probably fine. Heat and cannons exploding. Yes, this can happen. This emailer goes on, but it's rare in my experience. So that contrasts, obviously, a company that is set up to repair and restore vehicles that have had these will obviously come across lots of these cases. It's just the way of things. This is a real nightmare for a paint shop. Occasionally, a manufacturer will not put sufficient biocide in the batch of emulsion. The thing will start to ferment, and then when on a warm day comes along, bang, you think you're under attack. The emailer says, thank you for an excellent channel, and free to ring and discuss further if I wish. So those are the contents of the email so far. I haven't yet had the pleasure of speaking to this chap, but thank you very much for the email and the details provided there within. And so, and thank you too for your reaction video and your point of view, because many people will have a different view and different opinion on this, and I fully appreciate those. But this is a problem that lots of people need to address, and there is recourse if, as the email suggests, that there is not enough biocide within in the tin and might ultimately cause it to explode. But this being a known problem, the onus is on the manufacturer, the retailer, the supplier to at least help to do something about it to prevent this from happening. But there we go. Not everyone thinks in the same way. Not everyone agrees. But in the meantime, I hope you found that a little bit useful and prevent you from having the disaster in the back of the car. But if you do have that disaster, you do also have that New Again team that I linked in my previous video. So with that, thank you for watching. See you next time.